Today, I want to talk a little bit about who we are and our personalities and how I think that might relate to biomechanics. I have a pen pal that I've spoken about a few times, EGR, and I would say he takes a very, extreme stance that our bodies are just cells. There's no real personality. Like if you were to dig into the body and look for our personality, like, you'd never find it, right? And I get him. I would say I'm not as extreme as him, but he has very good logic. And I love hearing how he explains his logic because I think it makes a lot of sense. And he opens up my mind to a lot of ideas. He was telling me this example that I think is a good way to intro to this topic of he had a patient that had this pica condition. So pica is a psychological disorder characterized by compulsively eating non-food substances like paint chips, sand, sandpaper, dirt, chalk. The reason that they feel this urge is because of an iron deficiency. The brain interprets an iron deficiency and tells the person to eat this stuff. What I found powerful about this is how the brain is telling us very specifically what it needs. Then it kind of begs the question like, okay, so if the brain is so explicit in this instance, maybe the brain is actually telling us what it needs in many other dimensions, right? Like maybe what we eat every day, we think that that's what we like, but actually no, it's our brain telling us like, hey, no, like you got to eat like the reason you want Italian today is because I need, XYZ. And maybe it extends beyond food, right? Maybe it extends to other elements of our life. You can think of like, okay, like maybe the careers we choose, like maybe the partners we choose in life, the friends. So it comes to like, okay, well, like, why is the brain telling me something different from somebody else? And this is where EGR's philosophy that the biggest thing that is impacting the body to kind of signal what it wants is these biomechanics. You can think of us as just like cells, with very basic programming to optimize for survival. And therefore, the biomechanics that we talk about here are probably the biggest influence on that survival. Like either we're getting worse and the cells are compensating to survive, or we're getting better and the cells, are getting more freedom to be more open and comfortable. Like one case study that I would like to talk about is myself. So if I look at my own life, there have been times where I felt like when I was damaged, I was very unconfident. I didn't want to meet other people. I was like a different person, right? Like I was a meek person that was more just living in his small little circle and was focused on survival. Like when biomechanics were bad, for example, 2014, when this showed my teeth, that is how I felt. I felt like a hermit. As I get better, right? And then like now I'm much more comfortable doing new things, challenging myself, meeting new people. I'm not nearly as much like I'm pretty outgoing like I used to be when I was young. And I'm not that sensitive to like what people think of me. I don't really think about what people think of me nearly as much. Whereas like 4 years ago, like I'd be like thinking, oh, maybe this person thinks this, blah, blah. And now like all those voices have gone silent. Right. And like almost to a bad extent. Like I should probably care more what people think about me sometimes. This is like what my wife says. And what that allows me to do is, like my personality has evolved. I'm more the person willing to take challenges and do things that I would have never tried to do 4 years ago. I almost feel like I'm a completely different personality. And because I went between these two, there's a spectrum here, right? Like I've gone pretty low a number of times, I've gone high a number of times, and sometimes I was somewhere in the middle. So in these last 10 years, like I was waving between these two polar opposites, right? And it was completely impacting my personality and how people would perceive me. For me, it begs the question like, all right, so like if you can, even as a 40-year-old adult, you can change so much in a relatively short amount of time and then change back and then do that multiple times, like what is our personality? Like what actually is the thing that holds constant? And that's where like I'm not sure that there is much, right? Which gets back to how I started with EJR's point that like we're not, there is no real personality. Like we're just a reaction to these. We're cells programmed to survive right? And these biomechanics are the biggest things that are going to impact how we behave, how those cells behave, right? So when the cells were being choked off when I was collapsing, it gave me a personality that was like closed and just like focused on survival. When those cells were free and comfortable and my biomechanics were improving, like they gave me this other personality that was much more brave and outgoing and, aggressive. And I don't like, if I were to think back who I was in my early 20s, there's not much now that I think is consistent with the person who I was. So like if there were people in my early 20s that knew me well, yeah, they would see me now and they'd be like, yeah, okay, like there's a few things that are consistent, but honestly, or like a lot of people can say the same thing. Like I was I was a relatively intelligent guy. I was curious. Same thing can be said of a lot of people, but like most other elements of my personality, I would say have changed, right? We like to say that that was age. I almost think it wasn't age now. I'm sure like all those experiences help mold us, but I think like the biggest thing based on what I've experienced these last 10 years is these biomechanics, putting us either in more survival mode or more kind of like, thrive mode. And what I kind of take out of this when I think about it is I think my friend is mostly right. We have a much higher opinion of what we are than what we probably really are. Like, we probably are just a bunch of cells. And those cells all have like relatively simple programming, which is like survive, right? Compensate. Make sure you survive. It's a little bit like when you dig into a computer. Computers can do all these fancy things. But when you get down to it, like it's just a bunch of chips with really with ones and zeros, right? And I have a feeling like that is us too. It's like these chips have ones and zeros, and that one and zero is like survival or not, and it's always gonna lean towards survival, and it's gonna impact our personalities and the way we act and the choices we make in life. That kind of like blows me away, that we've been led to believe that our personalities are this relatively stagnant thing throughout life. And in reality, I just think that it's a reaction to what is happening to these cells.